I'm Lauren. Welcome to Publish It Group Talks. The aim of this channel is to create a platform that lives up to the motto of Arrive Smart, Leave Smarter. We're here to educate, inform, and inspire our audience. Today's studio guest is Mzukisi Ralawe, and I'd like to welcome you to the studio, Zuki. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Lauren. It's good to be here.
Just want to tell the audience a little bit about Zuki. Zuki is an executive director and investment strategist for Random Walk Investments. It's a private company focused on investments that generate social and environmental impact alongside financial return. Zuki has over 15 years of investment and finance experience following a successful career with the Investec Group. Zuki sits on the advisory board of the Southern African Regional Trust, a regional organization operating in 14 countries. His role and contribution on the board has been to explore ways for the organization to become sustainable.
That's right.
So nice to have you here, and I can almost hear the audience thinking, why is he here? Like, is he a creative? Like, is he a singer? Like, what's he going to share with us? And I can tell them what you're going to share with us, because I've known Zuki for quite a while now, and I consider him in my network of creatives, friends, and we've had great conversations over coffees over the time that I've known him. And some of the conversations I've also thought like, wow, he's an incredible person. And he's so dynamic. And I feel like you're one of my mentors. And I'll say that when you're talking with him. You really are, because if I'm not sure of something, I'll ask Zuki, or we'll run past ideas. And that goes from a business, personal, creative. And as his project's also developed, he's been a real angel in that project in helping me and the team that's been involved with just kind of fleshing it out and running things past him and having that critical eye, but in a non-judgmental way, where he's like, this is good or this isn't good. And why I've brought him on the show here is that I really feel that the audience can benefit from some of the knowledge that he has. And that knowledge also being, and this episode being focused on specifically presentations. And why presentations? Because as creatives and anyone who's listening to this show that's involved with a client-facing business, a presentation is where it's at. And we get a lot of creatives in the agencies, they're presenting to corporates and they're selling ideas, or they've been asked to pitch, for instance. He would be the client that you would be pitching to, that you would have your idea, and he would tell you whether or not it's good or what needs to be fixed in that idea. But from a corporate expectation, and from someone such as yourself that's seeing a presentation from a creative as they're selling you something, I really want to go into that in this episode. What do corporates expect from designers when they present?
I think to start off with, what's going to appear obvious is what corporates expect from not just designers, from presenters in general, is you need to be on time. It sounds very obvious, but especially if you're traveling to a different city, you might be delayed with flights and things like this. So you need to be on time, and you need to finish your presentation on time. So stick to the allotted time. That's very important. Arrive on time. And secondly, be prepared. Again, it sounds obvious, but a lot of people think they can wing it, and you can quickly be derailed in a presentation. So you need to be on time, you need to finish on time, you need to be prepared, and also as you structure a presentation, you need to talk to your audience, not talk at them. So for example, when you go through your presentation, towards the conclusion, you'll usually have a call to action, or you'll have some outcomes that you expect from your audience. And the kind of language you choose will speak to whether you're talking to them or you're talking at them. So if you have a call to action, for example, instead of saying, please order them to do certain things, you can say, I invite the audience to do X, Y, Z. So be on time, you want to be prepared, you want to talk to the audience, not at them. And then to put it all together, you need to learn about your audience before you get into that room. And you can unpack that further in terms of what I mean by learning. So for example, before you go into that room, you want to know who you're meeting, how many people there'll be in the room. You want to know things like their educational background, how much they know about the topic you're going to cover. You want to know why they're in the meeting, why were they interested, who invited them, and all of these facts will then assist you in how you're going to frame and conceptualize your presentation.
That's quite important. And a lot of those points that you mentioned there are often points that I'm just thinking in myself that there's some of those that I didn't even consider that you almost take for granted.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and a lot of this information you can get through. So usually, when a meeting is set up, you'll have an executive assistant that will be liaising with you. A lot of the information you'll get from them, from the person you're liaising with. So, the number of people in the room will speak to how many packs you need to bring if you're giving them handouts. You want to also, know what the venue is going to be like. Are you going to be standing? Are you going to be sitting down? And things of this nature.
Have you experienced before when creatives from agencies has presented to corporates and you've been in a meeting that has been like that, where those things weren't considered and they were derailed in that?
Yes. So a lot of people, as I said, will come in and they'll either over-prepare or under-prepare, and you quickly lose your audience like that. And also what I've noticed, not just from creatives or designers, is people tend to rely a lot on their slides, forgetting that your presentation needs to stand on its own. So think about your slide pack as an overlay to enhance the listener's experience. So you need to be able to give a presentation without the slide. So what happens is if you're trying to, if you have a wordy slide with like a lot of text, you're asking the audience to split their attention between listening to what you're saying and reading what you have on that slide. So text is, you want to have less is more when it comes to text, and you want to sort of like put together your slide pack where you use bullet points to jot your memory in what you want to cover instead of using that as notes. And again, if you're underprepared or overprepared, what you tend to do is you tend to read as well. And audiences can pick that up, and it's very easy to lose your audience. The key thing to remember is you are presenting at the audience's pleasure. Right? So don't waste their time. So it's very important to know their level of interest, their level of knowledge on the topic. That will assist you in not being overly technical or trying to cover a lot of ground, or just like, waffling.
And I suppose one thing to mention is dress for the occasion. Yes,
so the rule is you want to be comfortable, okay? So you want to be comfortable when you come into the room. So just pausing on the dress code as well. I mean, when you deliver your presentation, you want to be yourself as much as you can. Because authenticity comes across very strongly and the audience responds to that. So you want to be energetic, you want to be engaged, and you really, so what is the point of the presentation? You're there to persuade, inform, educate, and entertain. So by entertain, I don't mean you're there to create jokes, but you want to be sociable, you want to be personable, yeah. So in terms of dress codes, you want to be comfortable in what you're wearing. As I said, you could be walking around, you might have to sit, so make sure your clothes fit well, nothing too tight. But the general rule is you want to dress at the audience level or slightly above. And I emphasize the word slightly above. So for example, I mean, if your audience is going to be semi-casual, you want to come business casual. If your audience is going to be business casual, you want to come business formal. If your audience is going to be business formal, you want to be business formal, but slightly more smarter. And the reason for that is, if you underdress, you'll look like an idiot or amateur. If you overdress, you might appear very stuffy. So you want to, just to sum it up, you want to be comfortable in what you're wearing, because you're going to be standing there in front of your audience. Remember, it only takes, in any situation, it only takes 90 seconds for people to make a first impression of you. And of the 90 seconds, 93% of that time, the impact of the first impression is made through non-verbal communication. So the way you speak, how you look, and the way you behave. So you want to be comfortable. And then there's like obvious things like polish your shoes, wear shoes that are comfortable. You want to be well groomed. If you're having a bad hair day, make sure it's fixed, and things like this.
I think those are very good points, and definitely points that now I have to always be careful, because you never want to be seen in terms of the show, although we have our disclaimers, to ever be pointing fingers or saying, these kind of people are like this and those people are like that. So sometimes it's easier to direct it on myself, and I can say for myself, I'm definitely guilty of that. I don't consider those things.
Yeah.
As a creative, I don't consider those things. I just think about my presentation. My presentation has to be right, and now I have to deliver it. And I've got to go there, and I've got to represent it. And now there's all these extra things I have to think of.
Yeah, and then we're just scratching the surface here. So again, just to expand on the dress code, you also want to dress age appropriate.
Yes.
So you don't want to come dressed as a teenager.
Yes.
But more importantly, you want to dress in a way that reflects your brand.
Yeah.
That's very important, because you are a brand ambassador.
Yes.
It's things that are easy to overlook.
Yes.
But it's things that you can that can make you, enhance the overall experience.
Yes.
And make you confident.
I was actually at an agency yesterday, and I was having some drinks there, and one of the guys, I was talking to him, and we were talking about corporates and presenting. It's just a random topic that we started discussing. I think this was on my mind for the show that was taking place today. And he told me that he had worked with one of the clients that I worked with, also a large corporate, and he had presented, and when he arrived in his jeans and his tackies, and he did his presentation, and he told me the story, and I said to him, well, how did it go? And he just shook his head and he said, terrible. And I said, well, did they like your concept? He said, I actually don't know. So, we kind of got talking on that, and I said to him, well, I wonder if a really good concept would forgive that.
Well, so I guess you're asking, can you sell a good concept
badly dressed
or delivering a bad presentation, and vice versa?
Yes.
I think you can sell anything if you deliver it perfectly. So a good presentation can sell a bad concept, but I don't personally believe that a bad concept can be sold using a good presentation. And I must add, most of the things that I'm sharing here is through my experience of over 16 years of doing presentations. The presentation itself, as I said, or the slide pack itself is the last thing you need to worry about. Before you even put together your slide, there's many things you need to run through. So we've covered just the basics. We've covered the dress code. Maybe let's talk a little bit about how you start your preparation.
Yeah, exactly.
So assuming then you've done your research, you know how many people are coming, you know the level of interest, the level of knowledge. So the next step is to think about your message. Okay, so remember, your objective is to take the audience through a journey. So you need to have a message, what they call a high point. So what is the essence of your message? And you need to have what they call the proverbial pot of gold. So what's the key takeaway? So you have a message, and then you need to structure supporting ideas and points to that message. So that's number 2. Thirdly, so once you've figured out what your message is, once you figure out what the supporting facts are, you then put together your slide pack. I've made the point earlier that, remember, your slides are there to enhance your presentation. Don't rely too much on your slides, but the pack has to be consistent. So each slide needs to appear as if it's part of the same story. That's very, very important. I've talked about how you need to make your presentation conversational, because again, you want to guard against going in there and preaching or talking at the audience, because you can quickly lose them. So you want to make it conversational. And I made the point about text. Less is more. If there's a point that you need to emphasize, you can use images. They usually drive the point home quite nicely. And you want to rehearse, practice. You want to stand in front of your mirror or use a video recorder, play it back to yourself. Because what are you doing? So to rehearse is to rehear what you're going to say. So it's really, think about it as a way to, it's an audio, visual, sensory information reinforcement. So if you rehearse, practice, you basically try to familiarize yourself with what you're going to say. And that then means that you don't have to memorize it and try and remember it word for word. And that's where you get caught up. And then you want to prepare for difficult questions because they can derail you immediately. And you want to also prepare questions for yourself that you want to ask the audience in case there are no questions forthcoming from the audience. So you want to ask rhetorical questions that you are able to answer yourself to reinforce whatever point you're trying to make. You want to prepare for difficult questions. And then there's just small things like you want to be there, not just early, you want to be there way early. Why? Because you need to set up, you need to make sure that the equipment you're going to use is set up. You need to make sure that the equipment that you have is compatible with the venue you're going into. And you also want to allow for time to meet and greet the audience before they come in, because that also helps you break the ice. And by the time you stand up, you're familiar with who is in the room and things like that. I mean, we can go deeper and deeper, but these are just like high level things that you need to,
your A to Zs of basics that you should adhere to. What should I give the audience should they receive a printout or something, which would be a summary of what I've said with key points? Should there be any handouts that I provide? So let's say my concept is they're wanting to do let's say an event or something like that, and they've asked me to create a concept for it, and I've come in now to present it, or we're looking at a TV ad and I'm doing the presentation for that. Is there anything I need to give them to take away?
Well, I mean, there's no set rule, but what I personally tend to do is you always want to have a handout. That's why you want to know how many people are going to be attending the meeting. But what I normally do is I will withhold the handout, let them know beforehand that there will be a handout so that they don't have to make unnecessary notes. But then you just take them to the presentation, and afterwards you can then give them the handout. But again, I mean, there's no set rule.
And it's no set rule in terms of what the handout should contain. It's entirely up to you. You wouldn't necessarily do a printout of all your slides, or do you think that's something that you would?
You would.
Okay.
You would. So maybe let's take a step back. So you get a meeting request or a presentation request. Usually that will be accompanied by a brief. So the client will say, I want you to cover X, Y, Z. And it's very important to stick to that brief. So you have to cover every point that they want covered in the way they want covered. And you have to stick to that time. So, I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on rules. I mean, there's certain rules that you can use. So that for instance, there's a rule called the 10-20-30 rule. That means, in general, you want to have 10 slides, no more than 20 minutes, and you want to use font size 30. So again, you don't want the slides to detract from your story. Remember, you're trying to get the audience's attention. So anything that will cause a split in their attention means it's attention taken away from what you're trying to say. So slides are merely a visual aid. You shouldn't rely on the slides to make your story or to tell your story.
A lot of people have told me before that when you present, if you're not taught how to present, like someone such as myself, there's no courses that, let's say, you would go on in terms of doing a presentation course per se. I've never seen them advertised.
Well, there's plenty of courses. I mean,
maybe it's just me.
I've taken a few at Investing. The thing about presentations is it's you're constantly learning.
Yeah.
It's like with any, knowledge is about learning, unlearning, and relearning.
Yeah.
And that's what presentations are. You're constantly learning new techniques, unlearning old habits, and it's an ongoing process. What you have to remember is it's a proven fact that most people will remember in a presentation how you start and how you end. And depending how interesting or valuable it is to them, the stuff in between, most people will forget what you said. So it's how you start and how you finish. So when you're putting together a presentation, when you're framing it or conceptualizing it, then the biggest decision becomes, how do you start your presentation and how do you finish it? So you want to finish strongly, you want to finish with a call to action, and you want to make the presentation sort of, you want it to be in tune with your audience wants and needs, right? Again, which is where like the pre-presentation research is very important, because through that process you'll know where do you need to pitch your presentation. There's different. So in my work, I dealt with a lot of, we call them board of trustees, where you do a lot of investment report back. So you come into the room to tell them how the investment has gone, whether it's good or bad, whether you've made the money or lost the money. So you want to come in there and speak directly to what they want to hear, right? And again, so if you're coming to report bad news, you don't want to come in there wearing a flashy suit, for instance. Your dress code, your mannerism, everything else need to match sort of like the theme of the occasion. So preparation, framing, conceptualizing it, and depending on the sophistication level of your board, you can be technical if you want to, but again, I stress, don't be overly technical. And the reason why you want to keep your slides at a minimum is you don't want to cover too much ground, because you tend to lose your audience, or you start getting nervous, or you want to waffle. And since I've touched on nervousness, most people worry about being nervous. I was worried about being nervous sitting here with you. But what I've learned through my time presenting, it's okay to be nervous. The audience expects you to be nervous.
Yeah.
And in fact, it brings about, it makes you more authentic, or more, yeah. So you're able to get an emotional connection with the audience if you show some level of vulnerability.
Yes.
So nervousness is good. It's a natural impulse of your body. It actually, if you harness it correctly, it makes you sharper. It makes you, hone your message much clearer.
Think about what you're doing, what you're saying.
Exactly. And then I wanted to touch on, so you come into the room, right? So who are you? They don't know who you are. Usually you'll have your biography at the back of the presentation, in the appendix section of the presentation. So often what people do is they tend to go in there and start rattling off their career highlights. Nobody cares. No. But there are ways to do that. So you could, so we call it building credibility. So there are ways to build credibility without having to go in there and say, this is what I've done, these are my qualifications. Nobody cares, and they can read that if they want. So ways to do that is you want to maybe use a story about relating your background to the topic you're about to cover, or you might use examples from your experience that informed how you put the presentation together and how you arrived at the conclusions you have. So that's called building credibility. That's very important. Again, if the audience feels like you have no credibility, you've lost them before you start.
There's a bit of a behind-the-scenes whisper in the design industry that just says, just throw in some statistics. You can Google it, because corporates love statistics. You just give them a statistic and they're sold. And I myself, I'm like, okay, well, where do I get these statistics? And they're like, no, you can find it online, or, just throw in some statistics, it'll sell it. Is that true? Is that a marketing pitch? What is that?
I don't think that's true. What you want to add to bolster your case is you want to have up-to-date, accurate information. It doesn't have to be stats. Anybody can pull up stats, but you want to add information that's relevant to the topic you're covering, and information that's going to enhance your message. So stats might end up detracting from what you're trying to say, or people might get bogged down because stats are open to interpretation. So I can present stats that can be read 4 different ways. And if you're going into a highly technical, let's say, audience, and your stats are not framed in the right way, the meeting could be just about that.
It could derail you actually.
Completely.
Because you're using that as like your strategy and it's previously worked on other clients. Now you come into a large corporate who have studied statistics.
Exactly.
And they are analysts. And now you're presenting stats in order to sell them something, and your stats could look like a Mickey Mouse joke basically on the presentation.
Yeah, and then you might as well just pack up and leave.
Because I'd be terrified. It's scary stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also like other stuff you can add. You might not have a choice, if you're a junior person in the organization, but as a rule, I worked for an investment firm where there's different strategies that you can present on. I never presented something I don't like or dislike or something I don't believe in, because they'll come through. So if you are creative and you're being asked to present on something you don't like, don't do it, because they'll come through.
Yeah.
You have to practice. Your personality has to show, and just have fun.
And what about regular clients that you have on a weekly basis, where the same individual team is presenting to them every week on the same day at the same time, and it's because it's an ongoing project like you get with these larger companies, with the agencies, and they're continually discussing new ways forward, or they're presenting a concept for an ad or a commercial or print or whatever it is. Do you think that advice then, because I want to say that familiarity starts to lose over time, one becomes more familiar with the individuals you're presenting to, and so you slack down a little bit. So before you would be a little bit smarter, but then you start to drop. Do you find that
I don't think you necessarily start to drop. I think you get to customize the presentation exactly to their needs. So it's actually, the more time you spend with the same audience, the better it is, because it just means that you are now hitting the points that they want without having to maybe spend 20 minutes talking about things they don't want, because you know what they expect, you know how they think, and you know what they expect from you. So no, I think to be familiar with the audience is actually a plus. And I mean, it should improve your relationship or your delivery or the interaction.
But you should never compromise the quality that you're delivering on because of familiarity.
No. Familiarity doesn't mean that you don't do the same amount of preparation. Preparation has to happen with every presentation. And by the way, sometimes you'll be meeting more than one board or corporate during the day. And your presentation should never be the same. So you might have a master pack, but that will be tweaked depending on which client or which corporate you see. That's what we talk about, customizing your presentation to your audience.
Thank you. Before we sign out for today, I would like to ask you one last question.
Okay.
Suzuki has a very big bookshelf. And everywhere in his house is just books, coffee table next to his bed. He's an avid reader. And I said to him that on the show, we're going to have to at least ask him every time he appears, what is he reading and what's current at the moment, because I think you've got a definite passion for knowledge, and the books you do read are very, very interesting.
I've brought a few books to show you. Can I get them?
Yeah, sure.
All right, okay. So I'm reading at the moment, so maybe let's start off with this. It's called Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. It's written by Mr. Fuller. This was published in 1969. This guy is what we call a polymath. He is an architect, an engineer, geometrician, cartographer, futurist, philosopher. He opens the book by saying that we are taught that specialization is the key to success, but what we're not taught is that specialization precludes comprehensive thinking. So if you look at some of the greatest thinkers in the world, they have studied multidisciplines like this guy. And if you look at the most advanced, let's say, systems in the world, will employ people from multiple disciplines. So you go to university and they teach you, just learn about investments. You don't need to worry about something else. And that's actually a disservice to most people. So often I'll find people saying, oh, I don't know anything about finance. And the guy will be like a PhD in physics. If you're a PhD in physics, finance is nothing. We make things deliberately esoteric because it keeps people out and it makes you relevant. So this book I read every year. He basically coined the term participatory interaction design in 1950. And some of the stuff that he talks about here. So this book talks about he tries to solve the world's problems through using systems design, and he talks about doing less with more. So highly recommended.
That's amazing.
I read it every year. This one is called The Hidden Persuaders. It's the same theme as propaganda. Before Hitler, propaganda was actually a good word. It became a bad word post the Nazis. And this book is important in the sense that, especially for creatives as well. So most creatives or most people in advertising have never heard of Edward Bernays. And yet he's the father of public relations.
Yeah.
So he basically taught us to eat bacon and eggs for breakfast. He got women to smoke.
He must be brilliant.
He is brilliant. He got America into the war. He coined the term banana republic. So he's a psychoanalyst, and his uncle was Sigmund Freud. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, they used those psychoanalytic tools to basically mold the public mind. So he talks about how most people's desires, habits, attitudes are formed by men we've never met before. And then lastly, this is Zbigniew Brzezinski. This book talks about geostrategy. In a nutshell, again, this was written in 1997, where he's talking about American hegemony and how to control the world. And the route to controlling the world is owning Eurasia, which is Europe, Russia, and parts of China. And so if you want to understand the trajectory of the world, this is all you need to read, because it's all laid out. Everything that has happened in the last 10 years, he talked about in 1997. Or this other book that is written in 1970, he talks about the Internet of Things. Everything we're seeing now, the fourth industrial revolution,
yes.
He started talking about that in 1970s.
Yes.
So individually, these books seem unrelated, but they all intersect. So in investments or life, we talk about what drives everything. It's technology, information, communication, and all of these touch on all of those.
That's amazing. Thank you. We're going to definitely provide the readers with, the readers. I'm thinking of the books here, like the readers, the listeners in the audience. We'll provide them with links, and we'll also, you can find out more about Zuki. We'll give you his contact information. You can connect with him on LinkedIn, and he'll definitely be back. We'll be talking more with him. And I'd like to thank the listeners, thank the audience for participating, for being part of this. It's really great to have you. Tell your friends about it. Tell people that you know, get them listening, send us feedback. We love hearing from you. Thank you so much. And remember, we're doing this for you. We're wanting to educate, inform, and inspire. Thank you.
Thank you.